Regis Deon Thomas was born on June 16, 1970. He was the oldest of 4 children and grew up in south-central Los Angeles. He was a member of the Bounty Hunter Blood Street Gang, a blood subset based out of Watts, Los Angeles, California. Thomas was convicted of perjury in 1990. He had once worked at a liquor store as a security guard, but the building was burned down during the 1992 Los Angeles riots, resulting in Thomas being out of work for a year. After this happened, he was consumed by the streets and went down a destructive path that would then turn him into a monster that was hiding within him. The story begins. In January 1992, Carlos Adkins was shot to death in an apartment located in the Nickerson Gardens housing project in Los Angeles. Andre and Janice Chappelle and their friend Bertrand Dixon witnessed the shooting. Dixon, who was visiting Andre Chappelle, went out to purchase some cigarettes. When returning, he thought he heard someone call out his nickname. Believing it to be his friend Romeo, he responded by calling out. As he was walking toward the Chappelle's apartment, Dixon saw Thomas pointing a gun at him from the window of the car. Dixon went inside the apartment where Adkins was playing chess with Andre Chappelle. He heard a banging at the door. Chappelle opened the door and Thomas entered, making angry remarks. He had a gun at his side. Dixon explained that he was calling to his friend Romeo and had not been trying to sell anything to Thomas. Carlos Adkins then stood up. Thomas asked him what he was going to do and hit Adkins with the gun and told him to shut up. Janice Chappelle, who had been asleep upstairs, was awakened by the sounds of arguing and walked downstairs. She observed Thomas, Adkins, Andre Chappelle, and Dixon in the living room. Thomas was angry, and Andre Chappelle appeared to be trying to calm him down. Thomas started to leave the apartment, and as he was walking to the door, he apologized to Janice Chappelle for the disturbance and stated that the men in the apartment don't know who I am. Dixon thought he heard Thomas identify himself as Renzi. Adkins then stated to Thomas, "You don't know who I am either." Thomas came back inside, placed the gun between Adkins's eyes, and threatened to blow his brains out. Adkins grabbed the gun, and a struggle ensued, during which 2 shots were fired. Dixon ran out of the apartment and called 911. When he went to meet the ambulance, he was stopped by Thomas and another man. They told him not to say anything about the incident and pistol-whipped him. The 2 men forced Dixon into the trunk of their car at gunpoint, but Dixon got out and ran away. Adkins subsequently died of a gunshot wound to the right lower chest. The next day, Dixon informed his parole officer that he had witnessed a shooting and was advised to contact the police. When he initially met with police detectives, he described the shooting and told the officers that the shooter's name was Renzi. Subsequently, Dixon met with a local man named Renzi, who Dixon knew was not the killer. He informed the police that he had learned that the correct name was Reggie. Dixon identified Thomas's picture in a photographic display and later selected him during a live lineup. Janice Chappelle also picked defendant's picture from a photographic display, indicating that he looked like the man who shot Carlos Adkins. Several months later, Thomas was identified during a traffic stop and arrested on a warrant for the shooting of Carlos Adkins. In September of 1992, Dixon, who was then incarcerated, was transported to the Compton courthouse for Thomas' preliminary hearing. He was placed in a holding cell with Thomas, who asked him why he was going to testify. Thomas stated that he had not meant to do it and that it had been his girlfriend's birthday, and he had argued with her and was upset. He just went off. Thomas told Dixon that Dixon didn't want to end up like Andre Chappelle. Dixon was aware that Andre had died. He understood Thomas to be saying that if he testified, he could not go back to the projects. Thomas offered to give Dixon $5,000 if he turned the cheek. Dixon told the prosecutor that he had identified the wrong man, and Thomas was released. Thomas was subsequently recharged with the assassination of Adkins. At trial, Dixon identified Thomas as the person who shot Adkins. Dixon had been promised that if he testified, he would serve his sentence outside Los Angeles County if he were convicted on a pending burglary charge. Janice Chappelle also testified that Thomas looked like the person who shot Adkins, stating that she was 98% certain he was the man. Andre Chappelle did not testify because he had been shot and executed in the Nickerson Gardens housing project in March 1992. The jury found defendant guilty of the second-degree murder of Carlos Adkins. In March of 1992, Thomas purchased a red 1992 Chevrolet 454 pickup truck. Late at night on February 22, 1993, Compton police officer Kevin Burrell and Reserve Officer James McDonald made a traffic stop of a red pickup truck on Rosecrans Avenue in Compton. Margaretta Gully was driving past the scene, accompanied by her 12-year-old son, DeMoria Polidor, in the front seat, and her 11-year-old daughter and her older son's girlfriend, Alicia Jordan, in the back seat. Through the windshield of her car, Gully observed two officers, one black and one white, struggling with a suspect. A red pickup truck was parked nearby with the door on the driver's side open. Just after Gully passed the scene, she heard shots fired. Through her rearview mirror, she saw the suspect straddling one of the officers, who was lying on the ground. Her son, Polidor, heard shots and looked through the back window, observing the suspect shooting the white officer in the head. Polidor then observed the suspect get into the truck and drove away. As the truck passed their car, passenger Jordan saw the driver's face through the side window of the car. At trial, Gully, Polidor, and Jordan testified that Thomas had all the same features and the same body type as the suspect they observed. Both officers were found lying face down near the police vehicle. Both officers were in uniform with their guns holstered. There were 9 spent 9mm shell casings in front of the police vehicle. Officer Burrell died of multiple gunshot wounds, one to the arm, one in the face, one in the left foot, and one in the head. Officer McDonald was also shot 4 times, in the left armpit, the middle back, the upper back, and behind the right ear, and died of a wound to the chest. Thomas' wife, Deshauna Cody Thomas, testified that on the evening of the day the officers were killed, Thomas left her apartment in his red pickup truck, stating that he was going to his mother's house in Nickerson Gardens. When she woke up the next morning, Thomas was in bed with her, and he had a gun in his hand. Thomas's friend, Keon Pye, testified that sometime in February of 1993, Thomas arrived at her house and asked her to hold a gun for him. He gave her a gun wrapped in a bag, and she placed it under her mattress. The next day, a man she had never seen before came and picked up the gun. That man, Calvin Cooksey, testified that on February 24th, he was at the apartment of his cousin, Philip Cathcart, in Gardena. Thomas, who was a very close friend of Cooksey's cousin, arrived at the apartment. Cooksey was watching a news broadcast relating to the shootings of the 2 officers. Cooksey looked at Thomas, who appeared to be jittery, and Thomas said, "Yeah, I did it." They slipped. Cooksey understood that slipped meant that the officers failed to take precautions. Thomas told Cooksey that when Officer Burrell approached the truck, Thomas kicked the door open and shot him in the chest. He then shot Officer McDonald in the face while he was still in the police car. He then shot each of the officers 3 more times. Cooksey told Thomas he did not believe him, but shortly thereafter he asked Thomas where the gun was and offered to dispose of it. Thomas showed Cooksey a house and told Cooksey to return there later to obtain the gun. When Cooksey returned, the woman in the house gave him a bag which contained a 9mm pistol. He sold the gun to Robert Rojas. In early March 1993, Thomas was questioned in connection with the shooting of the officers but was released. He told Cooksey, "They think I did it, but they can't prove it. Somebody is going to have to tell on me for them to bust me on this." In mid-March 1993, Cooksey was arrested while in possession of a firearm. A few days later, Cooksey called a sheriff's deputy with whom he was familiar because of a prior arrest and told him that he knew who had executed the officers and that he knew the location of the gun used in the shooting. Cooksey told the deputy that the name of the killer was Reggie, or Regis Thomas. He described the sale of the gun. In a subsequent discussion with another deputy, Cooksey asked for help with his pending charges and told the deputy about the sale of the gun and about the conversation in which defendant admitted to shooting the officers. Shortly thereafter, Cooksey was released from county jail and accompanied by a detective located Rojas. Cooksey told Rojas he wanted to buy back the gun. Rojas contacted Cooksey the next day and informed him that he could get the gun. Cooksey met Rojas, paid for the gun, and gave it to the detective. Ballistics evidence indicated that the cartridge casings found at the scene of the shootings of the officers were fired from this gun. The jury found Thomas guilty of the first-degree homicides of police officers Kevin Burrell and James McDonald.